Hi, James.
Hi, friends.
Dude is pissing me off. He's getting under me. He knows he's getting under my skin too. You
No,
listen.
I just ain't letting Matt Ishby off the hook.
No, you don't have to let. You can
They
blame.
ain't gonna put all this on Isaiah. When
I
this
know
dude's
you've
signing
got
the
this
checks.
ridiculous love affair with Isaiah Thomas, but what I'm telling you now is Isaiah is running the Phoenix Suns. He is making the decisions for Phoenix, and Matt Ishbia is signing off on them. That's what I'm trying to tell you. This dude. James.
So if Ishbia says no, is it happening?
No, but that's not what I'm saying. Those two are work. Isaiah Thomas doesn't have a job. Isaiah Thomas does not have a job, but he is the one who is running this team and taking all of these ideas to Matt Ishbia, who's signing off on them. And James Jones sitting at home wondering what the hell's going on. He don't even know Bradley Beal's on the Suns yet.
He just doesn't have Twitter then, I guess.
He doesn't have Twitter. Poor James.
He doesn't have an alert for Woj bomb like the rest of us do. Yeah, I don't know. The Suns have, I mean, they're all in. They're all in on a magical 3 and possibly a magical 4, but they're trying to dump the magical 4 to make
They're
sure
all
that
in on an expensive 4.
Yeah, I mean, this really feels like a high risk situation with a whole group of players that get injured a lot. And then I thought it was interesting today too that they just put out this list of all of their free agents that they're going to bring back, and it's like, okay, wait a sec, like that's not how this works, and all of those people are going to have to take nothing. They're like, you're going to be in the double apron territory here anytime, and they're going to get absolutely nothing. So it's a really strange situation.
But they can keep their guys, can't they?
Well, if they want to play for nothing, I mean, look at their salary right now. They're like 160 something million.
Yeah, it's pretty insane.
No, it's wild. It's wild how much money they're up to right now. And so, they're going to be like way above the salary, the ceiling of the salary cap, and they'll go into that apron or the second apron, and then they'll be completely hamstrung. Like, they're not going to have a mid-level exception. They're not going to have all of these other avenues to bring in players. Like, they can sign their own free agents that have been there for 3 years or more to using Larry Bird rights. Anyone who's been there 2 years, they can use early bird rights to. But like, those players are going to want to get paid as well. Like, if I'm the Kings, I'm looking at Torrey Craig. Like, man, how do you get Torrey Craig? He'd be a nice player to have as your fourth or fifth guard. And I think a lot of teams around the league are looking at some of their secondary players, and Josh Okogie would be a nice, defensive minded bench player for any team, including the Sacramento Kings, at like a 2-3. Yeah. So they're going to have to figure out how to piece this thing together once they get it all wrapped up with the Beal situation taken care of.
You mentioned the second tax apron. I got a question that, because I think I learned something from Bobby Marks, but I've convinced myself I don't understand this properly. You're listening to D'Lo and KC along with James Ham here on KIFM West Sacramento, 98.5 FM, KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, ESPN 1320, always live on the free Odyssey app, live on Twitch and YouTube as well. James, if a team is in that second tax apron multiple times in is it like a 4-year span, their pick is moved to the end of the draft? Is that right?
Yeah. The first thing happens is it gets frozen.
Right. So I understand that. Like, you can't move it.
Yeah, you can't move it. But if you do it multiple times, then wherever you're, like, they even talked about the Golden State Warriors. The Golden State Warriors, who will be above the apron, the secondary apron, they won't, all of their TPEs, you won't be able to use a traded player exception. So that's how some of these teams have, especially the Boston Celtics, were like so good at this. They would trade players into space. And like when they were going to lose Gordon Hayward, is that who was it? Yeah, I think it was. They made the deal, but they made a deal at the last second where they traded him for basically nothing, but got a monstrous trade exception. And then they use that trade exception to go out and use that to get other players. So they won't be able to use their taxpayer mid-level, which is like $4 million, I think. They won't be able to use a TPE in excess of 110% of the salary. Like there are all kinds of things that they won't be able to do anymore. And then the salary cap, I mean the draft pick thing is really interesting, where they're going to freeze their pick where they can't trade it, and that's a mess. And then if you do it twice, then you just fall back to 30. And then I wonder like how that works. So what if there's 3 teams that do it? Do they like Rochambeau for who's going to be 28, 29, and 30? I'm not sure, but I like the penalties. It's a way of curbing this ridiculousness that's happened over the last couple of years, and you're taking away all of the extra ways for these teams to get hurt, for these teams to get help and to hurt other teams. And I think the days of everyone just lining up to go play for a team are kind of over. And like I'm going to go take a league minimum salary to play for a championship thing. I don't know if it's gonna be the same going forward.
This is a funny headline and tweet that I'm seeing. Kevin Arnovitz of ESPN. I remember when this article came out, and he wrote a piece a year ago saying how the Phoenix Suns plan to nail the NBA draft by mostly ignoring it.
Yeah.
They've given up their 23, 25, 27, 29 first round picks and gave up control of 24, 26, and 28. They've traded at least 4 second round picks in the Bill deal and a 2029 second round pick. So we'll see how this plan works out. Just giving up on the draft and going after the superstars. James, I don't have a huge problem with any of the financial stuff or the draft pick stuff. Like, I really don't. The biggest issue I have is I don't think these guys complement each other well at all. And I don't think this is going to work. I think depending on what you get with Ayton, you're going to need a point guard. Then even if you move on from Ayton, you're going to be small on the defensive end. I just think it creates a whole bunch of problems. Not a whole bunch, but it creates some important problems for this team. And I don't think it's going to work. This is a championship move, and I don't see this team being a championship team.
Yeah, I'm confused by the move as well. I really like Bradley Beal. I think he's an exceptional player, but he's always hurt. Like on the average over the last 4 seasons, he misses 25 games a year. And like there are things that he doesn't do well. He's not a great 3-point shooter, which is kind of what you need in this type of situation. He's also not a great slasher. He plays in the mid-range a ton. And you're talking about all the draft picks and stuff that they've put out there. I think the interesting thing about like mortgaging the future, right? Even if we like look at the Kings right now, you're Monty McNair. Like, why not? Because if you think Isaiah Thomas is running the show there, like the entire ownership group has changed, and like everyone's different, and management could be different. So you could go run amok in a franchise like this, trade away all their picks forever, and then be out of a job, and then that's someone else's, like, oh boy, like what have I left myself with? And it makes that job less attractive. Like, who wants to go to a job where you're completely hamstrung? Whoever is running the show after this season or the season after that, like you're still roped into all 3 of these guys, and there's nothing you can do to really improve the product if it's not a championship winner. Now, if it's championship winner, like who cares? But if it falls short, if they get bounced, and if again, we watched it play out in the playoffs, they didn't have the length and athleticism at the wing to compete. That's why they lost. The thing we kept saying on here was, man, if they only had Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges, they probably would have won that series. They probably would have kept going, but they didn't. And so you're looking at like this issue that how do they just replace those pieces? The Kings have cap space, and they might not be able to like go out and get those pieces that they need, which are very similar. Like they need that same exact thing. I'm not sure that you can do it, but I think it's really interesting, especially like for a guy like Monty McNair right now. He probably signed a 4-year contract. We don't know the exact, but it probably lined up with Mike Brown's extension. So he probably got 3-year. Well, like he's already traded his 2024. There's a possibility that he moves, he figures out a way whether it's working with the Atlanta Hawks or it's writing, like putting what's called a rider into a trade where it says you'll get their 2026 if the 2024 is relayed. If not, you've got to get the 2028 pick if they go out and trade their pick. But again, Monty could do the same thing. Just trade a whole bunch of picks, do a whole bunch of pick swaps, and hope that you're there to see it through. But if not, like, you'll be somewhere else and probably, be able to do the same thing again, or at least have your picks and go do what it is that you need to do to improve your team. And like, the Suns aren't the only team doing this. Like, so many teams in the league have done this. Even when we look at the Denver Nuggets haven't valued first round picks the last couple of years, and they've traded them away to get veteran players that work. And so, this is every team has like a massive puzzle to put together. And I think the Suns puzzle, just, sure, you got your corner pieces, but like, what about the rest of it? And it's not going to be easy.
No, it's going to be interesting. And what happens with DeAndre Ayton over the course of the next few weeks will certainly be interesting to follow, as well as obviously he's going to be shopped. And everyone in the league knows that. And I don't imagine the return for him is going to be very high. But it's this super team thing to an extreme degree with these big contracts for Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant, and then just filling it out with whatever you can. And now with these new, this might be the CBA the owners were finally hoping for, unless the Phoenix Suns succeed. And if the Phoenix Suns succeed, the teams will just look at it like, oh, okay, it doesn't matter. We could do it without the tax player mid-level. We could do it without all the exceptions they grant us. We've just got to, we've got to land our three guys, and every team who has the, aspirations of trading for a superstar is going to feel like, oh, well, we're going to be the ones who are able to get it done, just like they did. So Phoenix could really set the tone for this new collective bargaining agreement with what happens this year.
Well, also, this trade could not have happened after July 1st. Like,
right.
The way that they did this trade, it couldn't have happened. Like, the new rules put in place would have blocked this, from what I've read. And that's a big deal. So, like, look, I think there is going to be a mad scramble here in the last couple of days before the new CBA takes into effect, where teams are going to really kick the tires. And again, if you were the Kings, we keep hearing the Kings were involved, and that they had some sort of offer on the table. And we talked about what it would take last week. The overriding thing that I keep hearing, and I know Damian's heard, they just aren't going to include Keegan Murray in any trade. And you start looking at their roster and how many players can you say that about? They've only got 7 players under contract. They aren't including De'Aaron Fox in a deal. They're not going to include Domantas Sabonis in a deal. And then you start getting to this, okay, well, who's next? And they only have, if you take those 3 players, they only have 4 more players. They only have Rashawn Holmes. They only have Keegan Murray. They only have Kevin Huerter and Davion Mitchell. Outside of that are guaranteed deals. Like, again, PJ Dozier has a guarantee like on July 6th or something. They have until then to figure out what they're going to do with that spot. Kessler Edwards, they have a team option on Kessler. And again, they'll probably trigger that team. But those, we're talking about $2 million players. Those don't matter in the grand scheme of making a deal like this. Those are just toss-ins for salary cap. And I'm not trying to be rude to those guys, but in a mega deal, those are just like chips that you're using to make sure that you get to within 125% of the other player's salary. And the other thing the Kings can do is, in a deal like that, if they were going to make a monster deal to get a player that's making $47 million this next year, they'd have to come up with a bunch of salary, but then they can also waive their rights to Harrison Barnes, allow him to take away basically his Larry Bird rights, and then go out and use cap space. But then that's a whole nother question. Like, do you want to use cap space like that? Do you want to give up your mid-level or your biannual exception? Like, this is a very complex puzzle. We talked about it on the podcast this weekend with Eric Pincus, and there's so many different avenues that Kings can take here to better this team, but none of them are just as simple as going on the trade machine and throwing a couple of names in and having it churn out. They have some major decisions about how they want to structure their entire offseason, and I don't think they really know how to do that right now without guarantees of player X or player Y. So it's going to be complicated.
Do you think the Kings were seriously in on Bradley Beal, or were they just kind of, you know, loose talks, or not even,
Yeah.
maybe not even talks? How
Discussions.
how in do you think they were on the Bradley Beal sweepstakes?
Well, as a general manager, when a player like Bradley Beal, a player of his quality, and when we're talking about a three-time All-Star, we're talking about a guy who would slide right into your starting lineup and make you a better team. He is a talent increase over some of the players that we're talking about on the roster. And if you're in that situation, you have to, as a general manager, at least make the call. And whether it got more than that, just make the call. I don't know. But we certainly have, we'll have to find out down the road. And we're already seeing in the postmortem of the trade that they're saying, well, Keegan Murray's the like stopping block in any trade when it comes to the Kings. And it's something that, like, we talked about this last year and everyone thought I was saying, oh, you're going to trade, you have to trade Keegan Murray. And I was like, that's not what I was saying. What I was saying is that if you're making a call for OG and Anunoby, the first player they're going to ask for is Keegan Murray. And then it's up to Monty McNair to make the decision on yes or no, whether they're going to, push the button and trade a guy like Keegan Murray. And the answer is they're not, as of right now. Like everything that I keep hearing, they're not going to trade him. And so a lot of conversations end right there. Like you're not going to have further conversations with the Kings because outside of draft picks, they really don't have a lot to offer because they only have done contract.
Do you think OG Anunoby is their top priority this offseason?
I mean, he's the one that everyone knows that they would like, but it's kind of tough because what we're talking about is a really good player who's under contract with another team, and that other team has been reluctant to trade him the entire time.
Mhm.
Just because we keep hearing his name out there does not mean that they're willing to trade him. And that's always been the problem. It's the problem with him and Siakam. There's a very tight bond between Masai Ujiri and those players. And he has been reluctant to get rid of them. And especially if you look at the roster, how far away is Toronto from competing? Because it wasn't that long ago they were. And Scotty Barnes is only going to get better each and every year. Can you bring back Fred VanVleet? If you do, and you bring back Gary Trent Jr., that team really isn't bad,
No, I agree. I like Toronto. But if you're going, there's a certain point where you hit mismanagement levels, and I'm not suggesting at all that Masai Ujiri has hit that. But if you wait till the trade deadline in hopes of trading OG or Pascal or whoever, but specifically OG and Anunoby, and you don't, like you're once the season starts, your value goes down. You get to the trade deadline, your value is even lower, and then you get past the trade deadline. Now you're in the lose him for nothing, category. You just did that with Fred VanVleet. Now, I'm an advocate for that in certain situations, but I don't know that I'm an advocate for that in this situation for the Toronto Raptors. You have to know if you're Masai Ujiri and is it Darko Radog? Darko, I think is his first name, the head coach, the new head coach. You've got to know, like, is OG a part of, like, do we want OG a part of our future for years to come? Because you could hit, financially, it makes sense for him to hit the free agent market, and you try your luck with everybody else, but you've got to know that, like, right now. Because if not, you get in. I'd argue that's why Washington is in this position that they're in. They couldn't. Oh, we're gonna keep going with Brad. No, we're gonna keep going with Brad. No, we're not. And you don't get anything in return. Whereas if you had done this years ago, you probably could have gotten a haul for Bradley Beal.
Yeah, I think the problem is you keep trying, and it's the same thing that Portland's doing right now. You keep trying to put it together, to piece it together around these great players. And we're talking about legacy players, players that are top 5 ever in your franchise, right? And how do you just give up on them when they still have years of basketball left? You still have them under contract. They're still willing to play for you. But if you can't build around them, you have to do what's right by the player and what's right by your franchise. And I think both of those franchises are in this similar situation. And you can look at Portland, and their path to getting better is super simple, but it's hard. You have to trade Damian Lillard. I mean, you have to reset at some point. It's not like when you get all of these young players, the Shaden Sharps, and say you draft Brandon Miller, or you say you draft Scoot Henderson, like that's fine. But by the time those players are ready to really compete and to really be part of a franchise that's moving and going somewhere, like Damian Lillard will be a really, really expensive paperweight in a lot of senses. You know, he's going to be someone who maybe he can still shoot, maybe he can still play a little bit. We're talking about like 34, 35, 36-year-old. And that's just not how you typically build a team around an aging superstar. And so I don't know. It's all of this is complicated. And I feel bad for some of these teams, but we also have to look at the Sacramento Kings. They're a team that tried to build through the draft for 15 years and struck out like almost every time. Like they had a couple of bunt singles in there, and then they had one home run with De'Aaron Fox. But outside of that, there's a ton of misses that happened for years and years and years. That's what the NBA is. It's the biggest crapshoot. The lottery is just, it's a total crapshoot. You have no idea. I mean, again, Steph Curry, look at how many players are drafted ahead of him. There are 4 point guards drafted ahead of him, 3 point guards, 4 point guards. I mean, that's the way it works sometimes. You know, Giannis Antetokounmpo goes in the middle of the first round, and the Kings draft Ben McLemore. You know, so there's always that sort of thing that happens. So if you're like a team like the Blazers, like how do you build? And I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that they went out and got like one of the best draft guys ever, Mike Schmitz, and they should be building through the draft because you got the guy who knows everybody and who knows all of these players and has scouted these players. You have the pathway to get better. And, you know, I don't know. I don't think that that's the way they're going to go.
Kings hit a triple with DeMarcus. They just couldn't get him home.
Yeah.
Might have gone a step further and said they hit a home run with DeMarcus and just.
Well, they never scored.
Well, they were the Angels. They had a really good player that they just couldn't get their organization right with. And the Angels are doing well this year.
They had DeMarcus on third with less than 2 outs.
It's very possible though that DeMarcus is a ground rule double because the ball goes over the fence and you can't do anything else. No one else advances.
No, they could have got him home. They couldn't get him home.
Yeah.
He set up the winning. He couldn't get you home. Small basketball talk. I agree with you though, Ham. I think the move.
I'm still stuck on the ground rule double part. I'm just working that all out in my head.
I agree with you, Ham. The Blazers need to move on from Dame Lillard, and it's tough because you got a guy, probably the best player in the franchise's history, and he can still play at a high level. And to walk away from that, that's tough. That's tough. I get it, but they're in a situation, I believe, where if he says the goal is to try to win a championship and compete for a championship, they're not going to be in a space to do that. So you may have to move on from him, and that's tough. But I think, like you said, that's the move that needs to be made.
Yeah, and if you're Dame, you want to be part of the championship, right? You don't want to do the Mitch Richmond win championship with the Los Angeles Lakers, where you're sitting there clapping on the bench. And Dame can be part of a championship right now, and he can't be by the time this whole thing gets back on track, or at least it doesn't look like it. Because last time I checked, they went out and got Grant and they got Hart, and they went out and got some solid veterans. They went out and got Gary Payton III last offseason, and that didn't work. And this is a cycle that I saw the Kings keep doing. Like, okay, we're going to try one more time with DeMarcus. We're going to go out and get Marco Bellinelli. We're going to go get a backup center so DeMarcus can do some other things, and Kosta Koufos. And we're going to go out and get Rondo. And we're going to go, like, they kept trying to build those veterans around him. The Matt Barnes year where they brought back Omri, they brought in Matt Barnes, Aaron Aflalo. They just kept trying this exact same thing, and it never worked. So
that's not what Portland's doing.
Well, that's kind of what Portland did last year, and it's what they might do again.
But Portland at least has young guys there with, like, you still have Shaden Sharp. You have the third pick in this year's draft.
Yeah.
You have Anthony Simons, who I think, along with Yusuf Nurkic, is being shopped quite a bit. I don't think it's quite the same as, that hodgepodge of players that you just mentioned right there that Sacramento went after. Like you can see a potential young nucleus here. Dame would be the veteran in all of this. It's just, I think, to Dame's frustration, which Kenny and I were talking about earlier, is it probably take a while for all of this to come together for Dame Lillard. And truthfully, it might not come together in time for Dame Lillard. But I don't know. I don't know that I don't know. I can't make up my mind on if I'm Portland what I'd want to do with Dame Lillard, because you two are adamant he needs to be traded, and I'm not quite there yet.
I don't know. The Kings had lottery picks every year. They had DeMarcus Cousins.
Yeah, but they didn't draft anybody worthwhile. They
Well,
never drafted anyone with the fraction of the upside that Shaden Sharp has.
yeah, but upside and productivity are
Okay,
two
well,
totally
Shaden
different.
Sharp is good. So,
No,
like,
yeah, I mean, he might be really good, but
Shaden Sharp is.
yeah, I mean, we don't know exactly what he's going to be as a player. Like we'd like to think that, like whatever projects, but like I would still make the argument like the Kings had those opportunities, they missed. And again, Portland may have struck gold with him, but he's not a year away from being like a front line starter. He's probably 2 or 3, and that's tough. If I'm them, like again, you could wait one more year with Dame, I guess, but you're going to get diminishing returns every single year.
You just can't miss Thursday.
No,
I don't think they missed with Shaden. I don't think they've missed with some of the guys that they cannot miss Thursday.
Yeah.
If they're keeping that pick and they're drafting it, or maybe they're doing something with it in the future or whatever, you have to get this pick right. Regardless of what you're doing with Dame Lillard, you have to get this pick right.
No, I agree 100%. And like, what is the right answer there? I'm not sure.
Well, it's 3-3, so it might be impossible to get wrong, right? Like, unless
Brandon Miller, I think Brandon Miller is the sketchiest.
Yeah, you could definitely
someone outside of the top 3 who's better than Brandon Miller.
Yes.
No,
Okay.
the talent's too good. You can't. I mean, but that doesn't mean anything. You could take that talent and have it not work out. I mean, that's the way it goes. So I mean, if somehow Scoot Henderson falls in their lap, man, that's a building block that you just can't ignore. I mean, he looks like an all-star all over the place, and just the off the court stuff, just he's a dream. That's what I've in my conversations with people associated with the Ignite, they just absolutely love him and think that he is going to be one of the spectacular players in the league, not just on the court, but off the court. He's just so well put together and ready for the moment.
Tyrese better watch out. He's going to be on JJ's podcast every week.
There you go.
We'll talk more basketball with James Ham. Draft coming up on Thursday. We'll get his thoughts on what the Kings are going to do this week and what the next couple of weeks might look like for the Sacramento Kings. That's all ahead here. It's D'Lo and KC continue on Sacramento Sports Leader, ESPN 1320. Yeah, they are. I'm going to step out for a second.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi is bogging. It's trying to hold on.
It's back now. It was struggling for a second, but it's back now.
Yeah, it's been hit. I've been watching the little meter in the corner.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
How was your Father's Day, man?
It was good. We went out on the lake, hung out on the lake. It was windy though, getting pushed all over the place. That's tough in a pontoon boat because you can anchor, but it's hard to get an anchor to stick with a big boat.
Pontoon boat.
What's that?
What's a pontoon boat?
It's a boat with pontoons. It's a big, giant, like floating living room. Like I have a barbecue on it and everything else.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So,
nice. Well,
yeah.
The wind really affects that when it's blown like it was yesterday.
Oh yeah, you just get pushed all over. Yeah. Let me see.
Seems a little scary.
No.
You ain't got no control.
No, you do. You have an engine.
No. Oh, okay. I know. Okay, I know what those boats are then. Got you.
Yeah. So, I mean, let me see. I'm trying to see a bigger picture, but like Yeah, like the new version of my boat looks like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. But like our lake's too small. I can't pull a tuber or anything on my boat. Yeah.
Ham needs to move to a bigger lake.
Nope, I'm good.
He's
Right.
outgrown that one.
No, we have a ski boat to pull wakeboards and tubers.
How many boats you got? 3?
I have me and the wife have the pontoon boat, and then we bought a speedboat for during the pandemic. Our son was 16, and everyone's stuck inside. So like while they were doing homeschooling and everything else for a year, him and his buddies were out learning how to wakeboard, and then my son has a 21-foot pontoon boat. But again, we got a pontoon. Someone gave us a pontoon boat off the lake that was totally destroyed, and him and my dad rebuilt it for a senior project.
Nice.
Yeah, so they built stripped it all the way down to the base, and it's been rebuilt like from top to bottom. Everything is new, which was a great project because my dad is he's got COPD and a bunch of he doesn't move around that well anymore, but he got to spend a couple of months building a boat with my son.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But it's cool because we link up and we tie the pontoon boats together, so we can get like 3 or 4 or 5 of them side by side, and then you can just hop from one boat to the next. And
Party right there.
oh yeah, it's a party on the lake. Yeah, so Zion liked to motorboat too. Nice.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Endless.
People gotta let Zion live.
Apparently, he has been.
Still true. Motorsport.
I got my suit and tie. Jesse, all over them YouTube algorithms, boy. Jesse Tapia, don't miss.
Oh no. You just don't tweet out where I said that Dame's just going to be a paperweight, really expensive paperweight. Yeah. Oh, I'm looking at Adam Schefter. He did an interview with Dalvin Cook, and Dalvin Cook goes to the Jason Jones School of Fuzzy Camera.
Oh boy,
the glam shot.
We're coming back, James. Back here with our 1320 Kings Insider and creator of the Kings Beat, my man James Ham. James dropped multiple podcasts over on the Kings Beat last week. Make sure you check those out as we head into the draft, as we head into free agency, as we head into a big couple of weeks for the Sacramento Kings and, of course, the rest of the NBA. James, let's start with the draft. We're getting closer here. There's not a lot of talk of moving out of the 24, and there's just aren't those kinds of, not that kind of noise here around the 24th pick as there's been in years past. Is there a player yet that you've settled on that you go, I think I really like this guy?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of players that I really like. I think I would stretch and go for Trace Jackson Davis. We keep talking about the Kings needing a specific type of center to back up Sabonis. And this is one of the most productive players that we've seen at the college level. I mean, just incredible. 21 and 10, 4 assists, 2.9 blocks per game, can jump out of the gym. He doesn't shoot threes at all. And actually, he doesn't even take threes. He's only taken 3 in his entire college career and missed all 3. But he's the son of Dale Davis, and he's a guy that really, really stands out. He moves a lot like John Collins, but he's a little bigger built. But sort of that upright that you see from John Collins, he got a big wingspan. His shot blocking looks like it will translate, and his passing ability certainly does. He's also a guy that can get out and lead the break. And then like the other guys I really like, Roddy brings up in the chat here, he brings up Leonard Miller. I don't understand why Leonard Miller isn't like a top 5 pick in this year's draft, maybe a top 7 pick. Everything about him is like it says he's going to be really good. Now, we've seen plenty of players like this fail, but he's a G League kid who in his last 15 games in the G League was just unstoppable. And like 20 and 10 type player in the second half of the season. He had like a 30 and 11 game. He can pass, he can shoot, huge wingspan, big hops. Again, good kid. But he's been a known young prospect for a while through the high school ranks and stuff. I don't think he'll drop to 24, but if he does, the Kings would have to be like ecstatic. He's a super super talented player. And then there's a lot of players that I don't get as prospects. You just look at them and think, okay, like, is there a world in which I see you where you're not a bust? And some of those players are like, no, there's not. I think there are a good lot of players in this draft around that range that have all kinds of potential, but have done nothing to make you think that they can actually live up to any of that potential. And so those are the guys that I really fear. And then the other guy, like I like Olivier Maxence Prosper from Marquette. If he's available, like if he falls, especially to 38, I think that would be a great move. If he falls to the early second round and you've got to give up pick number 54 to move up, he's a guy with, a lot of the raw skills, the raw tools that I think the Kings need.
Real quick, aside from the prospects at 24, there's been a lot of talk about OG and everything else like that. Do you think there's a deadline for that deal for the Kings, like having to be before the draft, or can they go draft and you still think a deal can get done after the draft?
That's a tough one because if you're really looking at what the Kings have to offer, one of the bigger chips they have is a 24th pick. So you would hope that, there was a world in which you could select somebody for a team. Just because if you like somebody at 24, that doesn't mean that another team would be like, hey, that's the player I would have selected there. Of all the players they could have taken, that's something that I really do think that like there's a lot of value, or at least some value. And, we're hearing right now Portland is trying to shop 23 because, again, they're trying to build a team around Dame. And so you're going to have competition for some of that stuff, for some of the teams that want to jump in there. But I could even see if there was a player that the Kings liked and they thought he'd make it to late first, early second, you could slide back just a little bit. But I don't know. It's gonna be complex. And then the other thing is we're just now seeing some of that stuff from the new CBA. All like where we're seeing the second apron stuff today. The new CBA hasn't been out for everyone to digest. And so there's a lot of speculation as to what's in there, but until it's all hammered out and written into contract, it's not NBA law. And so I think some teams are still like slightly confused, even like on the podcast uh, with Eric Pincus, he started talking about there's a new exception and actually multiple exceptions for second round picks, including one that lets you jump ahead as if they're finished with their second year. So you could sign a second round pick to a starting salary at like $1.99 million. And that's intriguing because the Kings have been carving out some of that money out of the mid-level exception to go out and get Sasha Vezenkov. And I'm not sure that Sasha would take a contract at $2 million, but there is another avenue that wasn't there before that maybe you are able to go and get a player to come on board for a lower salary mark. And so again, I think that there's a lot of things we don't know about the new CBA, and it's going to take like this week is going to be a lot of conversations with other teams about potential trades or, a lot of groundwork with prospects and like talking to other teams about who they think are going to go at what spots in the draft, because most teams have a good idea whether a player is going to go before them or not. You've had enough conversations. The teams have a better idea of the makeup of the draft than any mock draft out there. So that is all going to be muddied with a new CBA that's starting, a couple of days after the draft when free agency opens on the 30th.
As we get to the draft coming up, and I think we're a week from the start of that new CBA going into play, but really the legal tampering and free agency and all of that stuff. Kenny brought up, Jesse posed the question earlier. I thought this was an interesting one. I guess to start the conversation here, Jesse brought the question up, like, what if the Kings miss out on OG Anunoby? And we're reading all of these things about how the Raptors, they have a reluctance to trade him and all of these different things. Say, what if the Kings miss out on OG Anunoby? And what if they miss out on Harrison Barnes too? For whatever reason. Maybe this stuff with OG drags on too long. Maybe Harrison is just ready to go, whatever the case may be. Where would you go next?
Well, see, that's a problem, because I think we could continue the what if. What if you offer Sasha Vezenkov a bunch of money and he just decides to stay in Greece because he's a superstar? And so, like, we're talking about this offseason could be a great offseason for the Kings. Like, they start filling a lot of the voids that have been there for the last couple of years. And there's also the flip side, the what if. And, we've heard Dallas is interested in Harrison Barnes. We're going to hear more teams that are interested in Harrison Barnes because Harrison Barnes is a good player. I mean, he started 82 games last year for the number 3 seed in the Western Conference. Great veteran, big time, community guy, everything else. Everyone knows it. Indiana is probably going to be interested, and you'll have Tyrese Halliburton talking him up and Buddy Hield talking him up. Like, there's going to be a market for him. So there is that concern. And, we've heard that the Kings, they have an idea what it's going to take to bring Harrison Barnes back. And they also, have had conversations with him, and it's whether or not they go a different direction. They'll have to, mend some fences, I think, a little bit, because you kind of left a guy hanging here, and he might not be willing to, number one, give you a discount, which I don't think he's going to. But number two, there might be some, residual if you make him wait and you're not aggressively seeking him out in free agency. And so if they don't, then we start jumping into a very weird talent pool. And I think there are like a handful of guys that are interesting forward, combo forward players. But a lot of them are on restricted free agent contracts. So you're going to have to outbid teams, and that's not great. Guys like Cam Johnson, guys like PJ Washington, you're not sure if you're going to be able to get them or not. One of the guys that I keep bringing up that I just think would be a really nice fit for the team, and I would think more as a reserve, but it's possible if he had to start for a year, that'd be fine. And that's Kelly Oubre. He's not a perfect player by any means, but he would bring more length, athleticism, a little fierce mentality that would probably do the Kings well. And then after that, I mean, there are guys, there's, is it Jalen McDaniels? That got traded to Philadelphia. Maybe he makes sense. Maybe a Darius Baisley, who the Kings looked at last year at the deadline and tried to get. Maybe a Matisse Thybulle. These are players that you can revisit that you didn't land last year. But I think in order to replace Harrison Barnes with what this next tier that we're talking about, it's going to take 2 of those guys. It's not going to be 1. And you need some flexibility, players that can play the 3 and the 4, because I'm not sure that I think the Kings in a perfect world would love to see Keegan Murray stick at the 3 and Sasha Vezenkov play a bunch of 4, but how much, we don't know. It's really going to be about how his game translates to the NBA level. So you're going to need depth there. And whether that's Trey Lyles or it's some other player out there, you need to improve. And, maintaining and improving. Maintaining would be bringing Harrison Barnes back. Improving is going to be a lot more difficult if Harrison Barnes isn't there, because you have to get a talent equal to Harrison Barnes and then you probably need 1 or 2 more players to go with it.
What do you think about Kyle Kuzma?
I've never been a huge fan. A lot because a lot of what he does fits the Kings, except for the fact he's not a great defender. He's okay, but he's not great. But he runs the floor great. He shoots the ball well. He rebounds better than a lot of the other power forward options that the Kings have. But he's also someone who seeks fame. He's a guy, that I'm not sure would want to be in Sacramento as much. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they can talk him into something. The Kings should have drafted Kyle Kuzma a few years ago without any question. They should have drafted him. What was that? The 2017 NBA draft. And like he was just sitting there for them. And he came in, he tested well. He went to a small school at Utah State or
I think it was it just Utah?
it may, yeah, something. Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah. But all of Dave Yeager's staff, they're really close with Larry Krystowiak, his college coach, and they were pushing for Kyle Kuzma because he fit what they needed, and the Kings didn't draft him. So he's not my favorite player. The fact that he's unrestricted makes him more obtainable than some of the other players. The fact that clearly Washington is going a different direction with their franchise, that tells you that there's a possibility to go get him. But he's not one of my top notch. You got to get this guy type players.
How far behind Kelly Oubre is he? Like a long way behind, right?
Well, I think, to be honest with you, he's a better player than Kelly Oubre, and I think that he fits better than Kelly Oubre. But I'm worried about, number one, the money, and I'm worried about just the overall fit and whether this is somewhere that he'd really want to be. Because you need to be all in. And with Oubre, the difference is that you have De'Aaron Fox make some phone calls, and they're old friends, and they're going to figure out ways to make sure that everything's moving the right way. And with Kuzma, maybe it's possible that it's the same thing, that that he knows De'Aaron, or he knows a couple players on the team, and he feels like he would fit. But fundamentally, if you just look at him as a player and his stat sheet, he makes a ton of sense. It's just you're not getting any better defensively. You come back with Kyle Kuzma and Sasha Vezenkov as your 2 starting power forwards, and Keegan slides over to 3. I think you're a better team, but are you a better defensive team? And the answer is probably not.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just looking at something with because I was wondering, can Harrison and are Harrison and the Kings talking? Are they trying to get this worked out now? And I see there's something in the new collective bargaining agreement, the new one that goes into effect in a couple of days, that says teams will be able to begin negotiations and discussions with their own free agents 1 day after the final game of the NBA Finals. So that goes into effect in 2 weeks. So technically, I don't believe the Kings and Harrison can talk for 2 more weeks. What caught my attention, what made me look that up, was I think Rich Paul had a little oopsie, because there's a quote from Adrian Wojnarowski regarding Draymond Green today. It says, clutches Rich Paul to ESPN on Golden State, Draymond Green declining player option. We will continue to talk to Golden State and explore all options. What?
Yeah.
What?
Squeeze me?
It was expected Green would opt out. Now he could talk with the Warriors, explore sign and trade and free agency. So maybe because he opted out today, he could talk to the Golden State Warriors. Am I misunderstanding this? It feels like the rules don't apply to everybody the same way.
Yeah,
I think it's possible too that a lot of teams are living under the previous rules, that they're just looking at the previous rules under the new rules.
Okay.
That they're playing under the new rules. I'm gonna guess that what is the NBA gonna do?
They didn't abide by the rules to begin with.
No.
But I thought we were working on the old rules.
No, but normally you don't see one of the most prominent agents in the league just publicly acknowledge it. That's what I was looking at.
Yeah, like a lot of these things are really interesting. And is it a direct quote, or is it a reporter who's like basically like rounding out a quote and saying something? Because like very specific language in a statement like that could be taken different ways.
Like when you quoted about how much better the Kings were than the 2016 Warriors.
Best offense of all time.
Best offensive
That
ever.
may have been taken out of context.
There's
Yeah.
a lot of there was a lot of dots in that quote. I ain't never seen so many dots in a single quote in my life.
You know what I love is that they quoted me as saying, I think it was on Friday, that according to James Ham, it is unlikely that the Sacramento Kings trade for Bradley Beal. And that's because they read like one little line in a 2,100 word piece or something and pulled out that one little line, which I explained right afterwards exactly why the Kings probably wouldn't be fully in on this. And either way, I ended up being right. So that always feels good.
Hey, Draymond Green, would you be down for him being a Sacramento King?
I wouldn't, but I mean, that doesn't mean that Mike Brown doesn't feel a certain way about him. And to me, a lot of it isn't the crazy outlandish stuff. I don't love any of that. I just don't think he's a great fit. Like he doesn't shoot the three. He's not going to want to come off the bench. Like those are things. He's not better than Sabonis, and he hasn't. I mean, he's aging as a player, and you're going to have to pay a whole bunch of money for him. So for me, no. But it's again, it's like the Dylan Brooks discussion. Like I don't love Dylan Brooks' style of play. The defender, is sure, but all the mid-range shots, all the poor shot selection, like the me stuff on the court, not just the crazy stuff in the media. Like that doesn't matter so much. It's that I just don't think he's a great fit. Now, are you better defensively? Yeah, you're better defensively with Dylan Brooks, but can he fit into a very specific scheme, or will he continue to freelance as a player? And I don't know. I think the answer, like, we can't ask a player to be something completely different after he's been the same player for 6 years in his career or something.
Oh, it's a we don't have a ton of time to examine this one. We can spend more time on it. We were because I think with the Bradley Beal conversation and maybe like a different version of the OG conversation, just it kind of brought out like this Kevin Huerter stuff. Like, oh, Kevin Huerter could be traded, or would you upgrade, Kevin Huerter for this guy? And do you think Kevin Huerter, 15 points per game, most of his career last year, do you think he's topped out? Like that's like you get the best Kevin Huerter, you're going to get what we got last year. Or do you think there's a little bit more room there for him?
No, I think there's plenty of room. He's 24 going on 25. I don't know if he's turned 25 yet. I haven't looked, but for me, Kevin Huerter probably learned a pretty tough lesson this year. And that is that if you're going to be in this style of offense where you're running off ball all the time and you're being asked to do like more than you were asked to do in Atlanta, which was like stand in the corner and wait, you need to be in like incredible shape. And I think he'll be a different player, because there were times in the season where Kevin lost his legs. And, we talk about, oh, he's missing, his 3-point percentage is down. Like he lost his legs. What happens when shooters lose their legs? And a lot of that was because he was asked to do all kinds of running. And the same thing about Malik Monk. I think there are times during the season where Malik Monk lost his legs. And, you're hoping that they'll come back with just a little bit more conditioning for the season and be ready for a full, not 82, but 100 or 92 or something more than 82, because that's where they need to be coming into this season.
Your internet's attempting to go on vacation a week before you.
It's trying, man. It survived though. It survived.
No, it did. It made it. No ham freeze.
It survived.
No ham freeze.
It's not over yet.
Well, that's true. We've had moments where you have frozen, but we can hear you. We hear you just fine.
The radio don't even know what's going on.
Radio's just chilling. They just hear a little computer sound. They're used to that. 3 years into this, like they're used to it. They know what that